Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Of course, a lot of breaking news updates to get to this morning. We're going to bring you the very latest as far as we can tell from the ground in Ukraine, the results of those diplomatic talks that we previewed for you yesterday. All of the complete psychopathic idiots who are pushing for a no-fly zone, aka World War III.
Yeah, World War III.
Thankfully, the Biden administration so far resisting those calls, but the pressure is being ramped up, so we've got those details for you. Also, some profoundly unhelpful comments from Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State, and also the way that big tech is responding to Russia's war in Ukraine in a very troubling way as well. Those details matter a lot. Very latest in terms of reading the tea leaves in Russian propaganda media about whether a nuclear war is a real possibility. Some very troubling signs there that we should all take extremely seriously. Also, the very latest on how the American people are feeling about all of this, what they think that we should do. We're going to preview tonight's State of the Union speech.
That's right. That's right.
And we're very excited about our live coverage for tonight. Please join us here. It will be Saagar, it will be me, Kyle Kalinske, Marshall Kosloff. We'll kick things off about 8 p.m., do a little pre-show analysis. We'll stream the speech live so you can stay right here on the channel and watch it. Then we'll have post-speech analysis as well with a few special guests. So very much looking forward to that.
I'm really excited for it. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a big speech regardless, just for the international community, obviously. But also, look, we haven't talked about domestic politics in a while, and Biden is going to be certain in order to bring it back to that. So very important, and I hope you guys tune in. It's going to be a fun night. But let's start with the update in Ukraine. So obviously, this is very timely. We're shooting this early in the morning. So here's the latest in terms of the battle situation. Let's put this up there on the screen. Satellite imagery, open source being used. We found this one here, which shows a 40-mile-long Russian convoy, which is closing in on the capital city of Kyiv. Now, it's important to note the convoy hasn't actually engaged yet in any combat activity, but this is a huge amount of firepower, Krystal, that is being brought to bear on the capital. This matters because we're about to get to the diplomatic solution, but the convoy almost immediately materialized after the diplomatic talks broke down and there was no real solution. So they're bringing a lot of firepower onto the city. Now, from what we can tell so far, the major military objective of the Russian military in Ukraine is to obviously capture all of the key centers of power. That includes the ports, but of course the capital city, the seat of government. That's where President Zelensky is. Now, just this morning, we weren't able to cut the element because it literally just happened overnight, but in the city of Kyiv, there was a major so this is an MLRS rocket system that plunged into a government building, blew this thing completely apart right in the middle of kind of the city square. There's also been multiple attacks, either missile or rockets, unclear exactly which one, on Ukrainian military bunkers that appear to have happened. Now, the reason that this matters is that this shows an increase in the level of firepower that the Russians are willing to employ in taking their strategic military objectives. Also, we're seeing continually more bellicose rhetoric from Russia. There are indications right now that Putin, obviously defiant in the eyes of the West, Dmitry Peskov, who said that who is the Kremlin's spokesperson, said this morning, who cares about the sanctions? So all indications that they're going to be employing more firepower. And unfortunately, that just seems to be the almost certain direction that this is going to go. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. We alluded to it yesterday. This is the current battle map. So you can see that the front line remains relatively similar to where we were yesterday, which is that we have the campaign against Kharkiv, which is near the border. Obviously, we have the pincer attack on the city of Kyiv. Also in the south, in Mariupol. Donetsk obviously had already had that military objective. And then down there, near the Crimean Peninsula, where you already had a significant amount of Russian forces. So as of today, the front line remains relatively the same. Another thing that we brought you yesterday, and we just wanted to bring you guys video evidence, is there appears to have been use of cluster munitions in the city of Kharkiv. Let's put this up there on the screen. You can see here, this is the use of cluster munitions, which are banned by the Geneva Conventions, long been used by the Russian military in the Syrian civil war and now used here again. Now, the reason that they're not supposed to be used is because they disproportionately unfortunately, go boom everywhere, and it can kill a whole bunch of civilians. So obviously it's terrible and it's a tragic event, but that's kind of where we seem to stand right now in terms of the actual battle progress. Krystal, no heavy fighting overnight, some use of missiles, an indication of escalation to come. And unfortunately, I think that convoy spells death for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, that convoy reportedly now 40 miles long. Initially, we were hearing 3 miles long, then it was 17 miles long.
Bigger and bigger.
Just keeps growing by the day. And I mean, this is just a sitting threat outside of the city. And I think we should not delude ourselves here that while the Ukrainian resistance has been very brave and the Ukrainian military has been, quite effective, and no doubt that Putin has made some serious sort of strategic errors and miscalculations in thinking that this would go a lot quicker and a lot more easily and not require, overwhelming firepower in order to achieve his key objectives. Let's not delude ourselves into thinking that the Ukrainians are in a position to outright win this.
People really need to check their expectations.
Exactly, because Russia seems to have gone in with the intention of doing this in sort of a small way and potentially trying to avoid civilian life. Because remember, again, they've sold their soldiers and their citizens on this is a peacekeeping mission, and we're going to be greeted as liberators and all of this stuff. So on the one hand, you also have a very uneven, lopsided dynamic in terms of these sort of propaganda wars. The Ukrainians are obviously out there. They're telling us about their victories. They're telling about the Russian casualties. They're telling us about the cities that they've been able to hold. The Russians don't want to tout their military successes because they don't particularly want their public to understand just how aggressive and how violent this entire attack has been. But the Russians have a lot more tactics that they can employ, that they have employed in past wars. They have a lot more firepower, just a lot more cards to play here, and an overwhelming military dominance. So yes, their planning was poor. I was reading this morning, they're having all these communications issues.
Logistics,
there's reports
gas,
that,
all kinds of
logistics,
issues,
they don't have their Russian vehicles stranded on the side of the road, troops unable to communicate with each other, which is like the very basics of warfare. They haven't been able to establish to this point air superiority, another strategic tactical error. However, let's not delude ourselves into thinking that the Ukrainians are ultimately in a position to win this thing, because I think that, long 40-mile long convoy sitting outside of the city of Kyiv tells you that the worst could very much be yet to come. And Kyiv is also being sort of besieged from multiple directions. I was just reading this morning that in Mariupol, they also have losing sort of basic utilities and starting to be in a siege situation there as well. And the last thing I always want to say on these battle updates, this is the part that it's hardest to get accurate information about, especially because, as I just said, there's sort of a propaganda disparity between the Ukrainians and the Russians. So take all of these updates with a grain of salt, but we try to bring you the information that is the most, the most confirmed, the most definitive. And I would caution all of you too, when you're surfing social media and seeing these little like heroic anecdotes and those sorts of things, those are probably the things you should be most skeptical about. But the bombing in Kharkiv, there's multiple videos of this massive explosion, blowing up this government building in the middle of Kharkiv, and there are reports of additional civilian casualties there. So it does seem like we're in a position now, with the diplomacy having initially failed, and Russia having suffered, setbacks and disappointments over the first few days of the campaign, that they may be escalating tactics in a way that could be devastating to civilian populations.
That's right. So there's a guy named Michael Kaufman. He's the director of Russia Studies at the Center for Naval Analysis. He's been very helpful in these times. A great follow on Twitter if you're on that platform. Let's put this up there on the screen. He put out a very, very long thread yesterday where this is the one that we pulled for all of you. Quote, "The truth is large parts of the Russian military have yet to enter this war, with many of the capabilities still unused. Not to take away from the Ukrainian great military performance and resilience, but I see a lot of early judgments and conclusions that need moderation." And another prediction, Krystal, which would actually fit with the Russian tactics in the Syrian civil war is this, which is that convoy is a major threat. Now, we all know that it's happening. And obviously we've seen the use of these missiles and more in order to level buildings, and the threat is very much there. So what many people believe, and this fits with Russian tactics, is that they're going to surround the city, or they're going to have that convoy, establish a quote-unquote humanitarian corridor, and be like, you all have to leave. If you don't leave, you will be declared an enemy combatant and you will be leveled and killed. And that is something that I believe that they used in the Chechen Civil War. I know for a fact they did in the Syrian Civil War. It would make a lot of military sense. It's basically a threat to surrender or die. It's a similar one that, even the US military done that before in Fallujah. So these are things, a longstanding way of saying, look, if you're a civilian and you if you don't want to stand tall, that's fine. Here's your corridor. You will be safe here. Your safety is guaranteed. Otherwise, it's weapons free inside of this area. And unfortunately, given the heroic stand, I'm not saying I personally probably would. I don't know what I would do in a similar situation. But a lot of these Ukrainians are going to be making and standing tall. That's what the Ukrainian government is also telling them to do. That is probably where we're going to see the bloodiest part of this war. Don't forget, the Poles put up a heroic resistance against the Nazis too. So did a lot of people. The Belgians in World War I. But we know how ultimately the military campaign shakes out. So I hate to say it, but all indications are that a tremendous loss of life is on the horizon.
Certainly could be headed in that direction. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.